Hello and welcome to another Legacy Deck Tech from NicFitMTG.com. This time I'm showing off the Stryfo Yorion EDH Nic Fit deck, which is sort of a mouthful, but this is a deck that I really wanted to try over the next week or so while I still have access to the packs online, all access to every card on MTGO, because this deck is something like 1,000 tickets. So I really wanted to try it over the next week. So what is this deck? So it starts with Stryfo. Stryfo is sort of a four-color non-white control deck, and it uses sort of Dak Fayden as a value engine with Uro and Punishing Fire to sort of just outvalue the opponent. It's running Yorion, so Yorion is a companion. It sort of requires you to have at least an 80 card deck. This deck's 100. We'll get to that in a second. And Yorion is a 4/5 flyer, and when it enters the battlefield, it can exile any number of non-land permanents you control and own, and return them to the battlefield. So it's got a few things to flicker with that in Ice-Fang Coatl, Strix, Arcum's Astrolabe. It's running a 1 of Abundant Growth. And then the last bit of the name of the deck is EDH. That's just sort of a meme because it's a 100 card deck, 100 cards in the main, 15 in the side. And it does sort of, Yorion requires you to have at least 80. This goes over 80 to 100, and the reason why is it's got a few cards that are sort of clunky to draw. You probably want to shuffle them away, but they're really good to have singletons of in the deck because it's got ways to find them. It's got 4 green suns to find various things like Klothys or Leovold that you want in some matches, but you don't want in other matches. It's got a 1 of Primeval Titan. The Primeval Titan can then find the 2 of Field of the Deads. All these cards are sort of a little clunky to draw, and you want to sort of only get them at certain times in the game or only in certain matchups. So that's where sort of the EDH name meme comes from. It's got a couple other Green Sun targets which are worth mentioning, in addition to the 4 Veteran Explorers and the Ice-Fang Coatls. It's running a 1 of Scavenging Ooze, which you can always find with Green Sun Zenith. It's running a 1 of Collector Ouphe, which you can find with Green Sun Zenith. You probably don't want it in all the time because you're running 4 Arcum's Astrolabes, but Collector Ouphe is probably the best creature that you can run against a bunch of combo decks like Storm, because it just shuts off everything that they're trying to do. Just buys you a little bit of time. By itself, it probably won't win the game, but it can buy you time. The Green Sun Zeniths can also find Uros. If you need to get an Uro, the Uro will die, of course, but then you can flash it back later or escape it later. And it is running a 1 of Klothys. Klothys is sort of a 4/5 god. It's not a creature unless you have 7 loyal or 7 devotion to red and green. It's totally indestructible, so it's a very hard permanent to deal with because it's not a creature, so you can't swords it. It's an enchantment. It's indestructible, and at the beginning of your main phase, your first main phase, you exile a card from a graveyard. If it's a land, you add mana to your mana pool. Otherwise, you gain 2 life, and Klothys deals 2 damage to each opponent. This is really good for just ticking an opponent who has a reanimation strategy, something like Uro, something like lands and life from the loam. It can just sort of pick off 1 card a turn, which is often enough to just damage them. It's also a very hard permanent for a deck like Control to deal with. Just the 2 damage a turn is going to add up, in addition to everything else you're doing. And if they can't solve the problem and kill you early, they're going to lose to Klothys, and they typically have no way to really deal with Klothys. Council's Judgment is sort of not a popular card right now. Other than that, it's running 37 lands in the deck, and 1 Agadeem's Awakening, which I'll get to in a minute. But it's running 37 lands in the main deck, 1 Dryad Arbor, a ton of utility lands, 3 Grove of the Burnwillows to go with Punishing Fire. It's running 2 Field of the Deads to go with Primeval Titan. It's running a Karakas with no white spells at all in the deck. Karakas is just really well positioned. It does sort of work with Uro, which is pretty good. You can bounce your Uro when you play it the first time when it's just gonna die. So you play Uro, you then play Karakas, you bounce it. It's pretty good. It can also solve or at least delay problems that come from opponents' Uros. So Karakas is just really well positioned right now. I think even when there's nothing to do with it, no use for white mana, it's still a very good card, especially when you have a Primeval Titan to find it. It's running 12 fetch lands, 4 Misties, 4 Verdants, 4 Prismatic Vistas, a utility land in Waterlogged Grove, which is just sort of, it's another green source. It's pretty good. There aren't really a ton of ways to recur it or anything like that, but it sometimes late game you just want to find this with Primeval Titan to draw another card. It is running a blue cantrip package, 3 Ponders, 4 Brainstorms. Brainstorms are really needed to flush away or shuffle away any of the unneeded cards that you really don't want to draw in your hand. Like let's say you draw your one of Primeval Titan on turn 1. You don't want that. It's running 9 basics to find with Veteran Explorer, 3 forests, 2 snow-covered, 1 not, 3 islands, 2 snow-covered, 1 not, snow-covered swamp, a regular swamp, and 1 snow-covered mountain, no regular mountain. It's also running all the relevant dual lands. I think it's running 2 Trops and 2 Bayous, and one of the other ones. So that's pretty good. The removal package is pretty extensive. In addition to the usual Nic Fit removal in 4 Cabal Therapy, it's not really a removal, it's discard, but you get the picture. It's sort of a disruption card. It's running 4 Abrupt Decays, 2 Assassin's Trophies, 3 Punishing Fires, and that's in addition to the Cabal Therapies. It also has a Dead of Winter and a Plague Engineer in the main deck. I wanted to at least have 1 Plague Engineer in the main because I'm running a Fiend Artisan as sort of a one-of, just to sacrifice unneeded Strixes and Coatls late game, get Primeval Titan, that kind of a thing. Also, the deck just has a lot of cards in the graveyard, so Fiend Artisan can be a big threat on his own from Dack Fayden, just filling the graveyard. So that's sort of that plan. So pretty extensive disruption package. It has opted for sort of more Dacks, less Okos, which is in line with what the regular Stryfo Pile does. Again, they run sort of Dack Fayden over Oko. I'm still running 1 Oko. I think they're down to 0 Okos and 4 Dacks. And then it's running a Questing Beast and the Primeval Titan. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Agadeem's Awakening. Agadeem's Awakening can be a land if you need it to be. It can come into play untapped if you need it to be, but you got to pay 3 life to do that. Or late game, you can tap triple black and X and return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that have converted mana cost X or less. So this can return a Veteran Explorer, a Scavenging Ooze, and Leovold, for example, late game. Or if you can get to 9 mana, which is very doable in this deck, you can return your own Primeval Titan back to play. So Agadeem's Awakening I really liked. This is sort of a new card that just dropped on MTGO today. I really like the flexibility it gave to this deck. When you're running 37 lands in a 100-card deck, you're really prone to mana screw or mana flooding, and so having a card that gives you some options there, I felt would be really powerful. To round out the sideboard, it's running 2 Carpet of Flowers, which you want to just bring in against Delver, but you want to swap them probably for Veteran Explorers against most control matchups that run a lot of basics. It's got a Rex Age, it's just sort of a utility thing. Pyroblast is good in all the blue matchups, especially combo matchups. Also note that Pyroblast can target any permanent, so it works with Dack Fayden's ultimate pretty well. Dack Fayden's ultimate, whenever you cast a spell that targets 1 or more permanents, you gain control of them. So you can Pyroblast the permanent, and it won't be destroyed, even if if it's non-blue, but you'll still gain control of it. A little bit of graveyard hate, some more creature hate, back to basics, which this deck runs 9 basics, so back to basics is pretty good, and another Force of Negation, which is just sort of there for all the early combo matchups. So that's sort of the deck, and I'm going to run this through a league in the next week or so before my all access runs out, and I will post the videos, and I hope you enjoy them.